Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I am super excited to be joining you today for our Cottage Countryside video hop. So make sure you check the description and hop along. Today I am going to be using some products from our new release. I am using the Always and Forever stamps and dies. This is a red rubber cling stamp. And then I'm also using the Lovely Layers butterflies and our paper pad, which is also named for the release, the Cottage Countryside. So basically, what I'm going to do here is a trapped embossed resist. And because I like my patterns a little bit more subtle, I am looking for patterns that aren't like really in your face. They're a bit more softer. So I've pulled out a green, I've pulled out a blue, and then I'm also going to pull out a kind of peachy orange color. When we did the release party, some of you had asked if I ever use my alcohol markers to color pattern paper, and I do. And so I wanted to include that in this video today just so you can kind of see. So that's the peach that I picked, and then we're going to move on. First, I'm just laying out my butterflies because I'm not doing anything else to them right away. Like, I just need to set them up to be die cut. And because of the way that they are designed, all of the like wing parts and body parts for each individual butterfly are all connected. So I know that every time I am cutting out everything that I will need. And somebody had said, you know, what if you want the body to be a different color? For me, I don't take the time to die cut it out of a different color. I just color it with a marker. But you could, of course, you know, maybe cut it out of another color and then flip-flop them. But for the emboss resist, the papers in the Cottage Countryside, which is all the papers that we do, honestly, you just cut them in half and you have an A2 size card. So that is what I did. And then this particular one has kind of a unique look. You could either do it as a frame, or you can stamp that middle part on your own and create your own pattern. Or you can stamp them together. I'm going to stamp them together for my emboss resist. And because this is a cling stamp, I'm using my Misty. I removed the foam because the red rubber stamps have the foam that's included on them. I'm going to treat my pattern paper with my anti-static tool, and then I am going to ink it up with embossing ink. Just a clear sticky ink. In my case, I'm going to use Versamark. And because I have not used the stamp before, and also I like to make sure that I get really good coverage, I'm actually going to stamp it twice. Which is the joy of the stamp positioner, if you ask me, like that we can go in there and do it twice. So while we are doing that, let's talk a little bit more about this video hop. So there's several steps along the hop, and like I said, they'll be linked below. But we're giving away 2 $50 gift cards among the comments along the hop. So make sure that you're leaving comments as you go. They will draw the winners by May 5th. So you have a couple of days to kind of get through all the videos and leave your comments for your chance to win. Plus, I mean, the design team is always just amazing with what they come up with. So you wouldn't want to miss out on all that inspiration anyway. So now once we have them stamped out, this is clear embossing powder that I'm sprinkling on here. I have mine in like a bigger container, and honestly, I've had it in here for years because I don't use clear very often. But when I do, I'm typically putting it over a larger background. So that's why I have it in the kit that I have. And I always preheat my heat gun so that way I minimize warping, especially like the pattern paper may not be as thick as your cardstock. So we want to minimize warping to the best of our ability. So here I'm just go ahead and heating it up till it is all nice and smooth. And you can see here it is a very subtle kind of tone on tone where you can see where we've stamped. And it is harder to see because the green pattern is so subtle. It's a little bit easier on this one. The pattern still shines through, but this one is harder to see the clear embossing. But don't worry, because they're both going to end up with more dramatic colors to really bring out that trapped resist. And you don't have to do this with subtle patterns. If you like more color, you can absolutely do this with any sort of pattern paper, or you could even do it with like a stencil or a background you've created yourself. And as long as it's dry and you're not going to have embossing powder sticking to a bunch of wet ink, you can stamp over top of it, do the clear embossing powder, and then ink over that, and create your own emboss resist on the background that you have created if you would like. So again, this one, you see more of the pattern to begin with than you do the stamped portion, but you'll be able to see them equally as well once we move on to the inking portion of it. Why can't I talk? I don't know why. Maybe it's because I do feel quite discombobulated, because I am doing this voiceover not like normally we do it in my craft room. Also, if it sounds weird, that's why. But I'm actually doing it in in my parents' it's not even a dining room. We used to call it the front room. But anyway, because I'm spending the night with my mom. So anywho, so here I have chose like a mid-tone green. So I went with Mowed Lawn, and then Rustic Wilderness, and then Black Soot. And some of you guys might be like, "Ooh, Kelly, them are some really dark colors." Yes, but this works best when you have contrast. So if we have a lighter colored cardstock or a lighter pattern paper, putting the ink on dark is really going to give it its best chance to kind of pop forward. Plus we have the additional interest of the shine from the embossing powder, the texture, the slick surface that it creates. So basically I'm just doing kind of like a little halo. I went over everything with the mid-tone. Well, I guess it's technically my lightest color. It is still like Mowed Lawn isn't light, but it is the lightest color in this particular combination. Yeah, words hard. So anyway, the Rustic Wilderness, I'm not taking that all the way in. I'm just going around the edges, and I'm going to do the same thing with the Black Soot. Now, you will notice that when we first do the Black Soot, it is, well, it's ugly. It's hideous. Like, you can tell it's very much black, and it does not belong. But fret not, because we have to create the depth of color, because you can also see when we put the Black Soot on how it is making that embossing pop, and that is what we need. So by doing our ink blending twice, we get the benefit of the Black Soot, but because ink blending basically adheres to the rule of whatever color you put on last is the color you're going to see the most. When we bring this Rustic Wilderness in right over top of that Black Soot, it becomes a much deeper, richer green, and you can't see that black like you could when we first put it on. So then, of course, I am going to bring in that Mowed Lawn again, and I'm going to go right over top of that. Now, I don't end up covering the entire panel again, so the center is going to be lighter, but with the design that I had in mind, I wasn't overly worried about that. You can see this is kind of messy. If you don't like messy hands, wear gloves. So then to remove the ink, you can use a dry cloth, which is what you see me doing here, and it will remove some of it. But a slightly damp, I don't mean wet because this ink is reactive, a slightly damp cloth or paper towel is really the best way to remove it, and then we can really nicely see that contrast between the stamping that we've done and the background color that we've inked on. And that green is, because the pattern was so subtle to begin with, it is a little bit more difficult to see. This one, the variations between the flowers, is easier to see when we get done with it. But just because of the style of card maker I am, neither one of them is a really kind of like over the top in your face busy. But that doesn't mean that it could be. This is just a technique for you, to learn and see, and then take what you enjoy about it and do whatever you would like. So you can obviously do this with any color. It would work. Blues and greens is just kind of what I was drawn to within the paper pack, which is okay. So I just told you guys, like, I'm sitting in my parents' quote unquote front room, which we always called the blue room, because for as long as I can remember, this room has had like blue carpet or blue, like when I was growing up, it had blue couches. God, those were the best couches to take naps on. Like they had a big picture window, and the blue couch was right in front of the picture window. And when I would come home from school, I'd just lay there and nap, in the sunshine, in the sunshine. But so that's why I don't even know what to call it, because my mom kind of came up in that time frame when people had a room but they didn't use it. Like I always think of the movie Drop Dead Fred. Does anyone remember that movie? I'm totally telling you what generation I grew up in. But like in Drop Dead Fred, she had this like this room that had like this, like a red velvet rope, and you couldn't go into the front room because nobody sat there, and it was only just for looks, and it was like a sitting room, but nobody actually sat in it. And so my mother, God love her, always wanted that kind of sitting room. And that's what the blue room, our front room, was supposed to be. But us terrible children, like we always overtook all of the spaces. And so it never was a room that like nobody used. We always used it. When I was younger, I loved playing video games, but I wasn't, rightfully so, I totally agree with, like I wasn't allowed to have like boys upstairs or, any of that. So like when I wanted to play video games, I had to sit in the front room, to play games on my little TV, so I mean, it's like the room that she always wanted people to never be in, but then we were all in it. And like when Graham was at home here, that was where she slept. Her hospital bed was in the blue room. And my mom brought up a day bed for the dining room, and then she slept on the day bed with Graham, kind of very similar to kind of what we're doing now, minus the day bed. But yeah, it is like very strange, because in my house, like, not that I want my house to be dirty, but there's no area of my house that like I would say my kids couldn't go. Like the front room in my home is my kids' play area. Like that's where my son plays his video games, and like the extra TV is set up in there. Because that's kind of like their space. So such a huge difference in generations. And not that my mom ever told us no, but like I just know now, looking back, conversations that I've had for her, that she always envisioned that being like her sitting room that nobody used. And that dream just never came to fruition. So anyway, I digress. So here I have stamped some sentiments from the Always and Forever. I just went with very simple thinking of you and hello friend. There are lots of good ones, like with sympathy. There's a happy Mother's Day in there. And then I am also die cutting out the diamond for the center and my embossed areas. Here is where we're going to get into the alcohol markers on the pattern paper. I colored some of these butterflies in a previous product spotlight, but here I am still doing them orange. I am just like, the darkest color is this E09, and so I'm putting that for the body and then kind of stretching it out, and then going over that with my dark midtone, which is a YR09, and then my light midtone, which is a YR04, and then my lightest color is a YR02. But starting with the YR09, because alcohol markers are transparent, you can still see the pattern of the paper through the coloring, which gives them this really pretty pattern in addition to the embossing that you get from the lovely layers. And then I am going to leave them in here, so just in case you're like, I'm looking for an example of the lovely layers and I want to see how they all kind of get colored and put together, I'm leaving all of that in, but I am speeding it up. So if you are like, hey, you're moving too fast for me, I totally get it. Just use the little, I think it's a little like a gear icon on YouTube to adjust the playback speed. You probably want to mute me because I'll sound like I'm speaking in slow motion. But it will give you the opportunity to kind of watch it as slow as you need for it to be. I put together all of the butterflies. I used all of the butterflies in my 2 cards. There is not a butterfly in here that I don't love. I'm a big fan of butterflies. I think that they could go for any occasion and any color combination. Like, I have so many plans for these lovely layer butterflies. They have made my heart so happy. This is the smallest one, and I do see him getting quite a bit of use. Something to note on that first one I did, there is a segment that goes onto his body. But I didn't realize I actually had lost the piece until after it was already on the card, and I just happened to be looking at the layering guide, and I was like, oh, there's an extra little like segmented piece of his body. I don't think like anybody would notice if they didn't have the die set themselves. Like I said, I didn't even notice until it was too late. And there, what you just saw me do there was I was gluing the wrong piece. Did you see me like wave it away? I was like, no, don't do that. I literally said that out loud. So then here, this one is, they definitely have some more interesting poses, which I really am a big fan of because I think that gives us more versatility, to be able to have them flying different directions. And if you wanted to use them to accent a sentiment, that's actually what I am totally going to do today. I'm going to accent my sentiment with my little butterflies. And I'm also going to create a little bit of like it's not a true complementary color situation in case of the green. It is with the blue. Blue and orange are complementary colors. But that orange does look very nice with the richer kind of green colors as well. This is the first time I put this one together, and I did kind of have to play with it a little to make sure that I got the wings right. But I just picked it up and held it in my hand. Thankfully, you have a little bit of wiggle room with that liquid adhesive, and I had no issues. Once I had them all together, I realized that I would prefer if their bodies were a little bit darker. So I just went in with a darker brown and just colored just their bodies with that. And I was much happier with the way that they were looking. I just needed that little bit of contrast. So now I have all of my pieces parts cut out. Here is me, the cheap chicken. I am using my navy cardstock. It is cut slightly smaller than the A2 size card, just so I have like an 1/8 of an inch border. And obviously you can see this was where my sentiment and my diamond were cut out of, but nobody's going to know once I put this on top of here unless they watch this video. And I'm just going to cover that right up. So I am playing a little bit with like layers here. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I just think it makes it a little bit more interesting. So I used the die cut for the middle piece without stamping it. I just cut it out of white. And then I'm going to pop up this straight edged kind of diamond piece right over top of it. So you're not going to see very much of that little white, like roughly edge sticking out, but just enough to kind of break it up. And then the white heat embossed sentiments I will just put right in the middle. And you could leave it like this. You could just leave it nice and simple, but I'm going to bring in that complementary color with the butterflies and just kind of accent it, because I feel like that takes a somewhat simple design. I just feel like it takes it up a notch because we have those kind of bright pops of color. Now, if you were doing maybe like a with sympathy kind of card, you could absolutely remake this design with the butterflies. I would just maybe do them maybe a little bit more monochromatic, or like a softer color, maybe just leave it that original kind of soft peach color. I did, because I popped up that middle diamond piece, I did pop up some of their wings, not higher than the diamond, but just so they were kind of like flush. But this does help to give them a little bit more movement and, again, the interest. I apologize that my camera keeps going in and out of focus. I don't know what its problem was. But so for the blue one, I did a larger butterfly to the left and then the two smaller ones to the right. And then for the green, I did, just the two, but they were a little bit larger. And then for the pearls, I went with a light green for the green one. I think this is from Holiday Wishes. The Cottage Countryside does have its own pearls as well as its gem stickers. I just don't have them yet. So I'm just using what I got in my stash. I love all of the stickers. And then I use the light blue on the blue card. I use some clear sparkle on all of my butterflies. And then this was feeling a little bit like it needed a little something extra. If I had known that I was going to need this, I would have just put the die in place, held it there, and traced the inside edge. But since it was already done, I am just drawing a frame around the diamond by leaving a little bit of that edge on the the outside, and then just connecting the white lines. I just feel like that frame gives it a little bit more finished look. And then for the butterflies, I use the white gel pen to either do some stripes or dots or, something that just added a little bit more interest. And then that was the last thing that I did before both of them were finished. So I hope that you found some inspiration here. Thank you so much for joining us on our release hop. Please continue hopping down below. Thank you guys so much for your time. I always appreciate you, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.